to another episode of Moments Off the Mat. This is the FARGO Week edition. I'm Taylor Miller, the Communications Manager at USA Wrestling. I'm joined by Julia Salata, a women's national team member, college coach at King University. So we're doing a series this week about just FARGO, considering this would be the week that FARGO would be happening right now. So I just want to touch base with Julia. She's been a part of it for a long time. So Julia, just give us a little background for you and FARGO, how long you've been around it and all that.
So I started going to FARGO in 2008. That was my freshman year of high school. I wrestled there all 4 years of high school and then didn't go back in 2012. But in 2013, I got asked to go coach Team New York. And I said, okay, yeah, like I love to help out. I love to give back. I'll go. And I was like, hey, coaching was a lot more fun than being an athlete. Sure, I'll come back next year. So I'm back in 2014 and then 15 and then 16 and then 17, 18 and 19. And then here we are at 2020. So 4 years as an athlete, 7 years as a coach, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 7 years as a coach at Team New York. So I've been 11 years out of the last 12. And it just sucks you in, man. You just keep going back over and over and over again. But it's a special week, for better or for worse. And it's kind of a weird year without it.
Yeah. Tell us about how that what you just said, it sucks you in. Like there's days at FARGO that are really hard. There's days that are really fun, but there's just something about every year it's a must to attend or to watch, whatever.
So I think kind of one of the running jokes that you hear from anyone that's been in FARGO, 3, 4, 5 times, that it's like the movie Groundhog Day. Like every day you wake up, it's in exactly the same day over and over and over for 10 days straight. And coaching Team New York, we actually do our camp out there as well. So we actually go out 5 days before the tournament even starts, do a whole camp, and then we have the entire tournament. So we're there usually for like 12 days, which is a really, really long time. And you're living that same day over and over again. And by the time that's done, and you're waking up, like I said, we're doing camp, so we're waking up at like 6 a.m. You don't get done with the tournament until like 9. You get something to eat at B-dubs. It's 10:30. Then you end up at the turf, and suddenly it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And like the next thing you know, you're going to bed at 3 a.m. and waking up at 6 and doing it all over again. So you're not sleeping either. And when that last day comes, you're like, this was so terrible. I am never coming back here ever again as long as I live. And then like 6 months go by and you like, someone mentioned, Flo post something about FARGO or something, post an old match, or USA Wrestling post an old match. And you're like, oh man, FARGO, that's only like 6 months away. And then like 3 months after that, like emails start getting sent out about it because you have to plan for this months in advance. And the next thing you know, you're like, man, I can't wait for FARGO week. And then like it's there and you're like, and you pack your bags and you go there, and like day 6, you're like, why did I do this again? Like, I don't know why. It's like that quote that's like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and like expecting a different result. Like that's FARGO. But while you're there, it's just so much fun. I mean, everybody's there. So friends that I made in FARGO when I was in high school who are now coaching other states, that's when I get to see them every year. So it's kind of like a big reunion at the same time. And I think that's kind of the fun in it for me now, especially coaching versus being an athlete. The level of wrestling is getting better and better every year, especially on the women's side. The event itself is so exciting. The finals are unlike anything else this country has to offer in terms of wrestling. So, I mean, it's such a cool event. So it's kind of chaos and it's hard and draining, but it's really hard to stop going back because you're going to have fun at least at some point. And just being in that atmosphere is so great, but you're definitely happy when it's over, for sure.
I imagine though, as a coach, it's just so rewarding just to kind of see athletes, either it's getting better each year or you're losing first round, coming way back and placing. I imagine that's got to be super rewarding.
And especially for me as a college coach, like I said, I've been coaching Team New York for 7 years. I'm going to my 5th year at King, and every year I've been a coach at King, I've had at least one of my Team New York girls come to King. I've recruited them, they've came to me. And that's really a result of the relationships that I've built with these girls in FARGO. Some of them that I coached them all 4 years in FARGO of their high school career. And now I'm going to their junior year of them wrestling for me at King. So I think that's just a testament to the kinds of bonds you build with these athletes during that tournament. You ride the highs and lows with them. And, this is what I do for a living. I coach, but FARGO is just different. For a lot of these kids, it's their first time competing nationally, first time leaving the state in some cases. And it's such a big deal for them to be able to have the opportunity to wrestle in that big of an event and represent their state. And to be able to go through that journey with them is pretty awesome.
Yeah, you brought up a good point, just about kind of how Fargo helps you professionally. I'm wondering if you can just kind of expand on it a little bit, because obviously there's really like an intense week of just coaching, the whole time. What do you learn? How does that help you professionally? And then along with the recruiting aspect, which you kind of mentioned already.
I think the biggest thing for me, is just a different age group than what I'm used to working with. As a college coach, I'm essentially dealing with young adults a lot of the time. There are girls who've been wrestling for a long time. They know what they need. And they're able to communicate that pretty well. You know, what I mean, we meet these girls at the beginning of the year, especially upperclassmen. They're like, "Hey, this is what I need from you this year. This is what I want to work on." It's very easy to communicate. Whereas a lot of these younger girls are a little bit more immature emotionally. Not that they're immature people, but as an athlete and a competitor, they're a little more immature. So they're a little emotional. If they have a tough loss, they don't handle it as well. When we're in camp, they don't necessarily know what they want to work on. They're just there to learn. And they walk into the Fargo Dome and they're so overwhelmed. And it's like, you have to talk them through everything. You know what I mean? Like they want to talk to you about these like deeper things about this, I don't want to disappoint my family. And this is my first time representing my state and all these things. And that's something that I'm not used to dealing with day to day coaching college girls. But I think that really helps me grow as a coach and learning on how to deal with a very wide variety of athletes, from the kid who's in their fourth year at Fargo and is finally pushing to be a national champion, to a girl that it's her first time there and has never wrestled in a venue even a third of the size of the Fargo Dome, and they walk in that arena and just freeze, and you have to talk them through it. So it's a really great growing and learning opportunity for me as a coach. Even though I've been doing it for 7-8 years now, every year is still completely different. We bring in a new crop of girls. With Team New York, we usually have around 50 to 60 kids, which is one of the biggest women's teams. So it's just a really cool opportunity. And one of the coolest things for me too is that being with Team New York, we have a large percentage of our team that comes and beat the streets in New York. And that group is my favorite to work with. I referenced earlier that I've got at least one New York girl every year. I also get at least one beat the streets girl on my team every year as well. And those kids are just awesome. They're my favorite ones to work with. They're just gritty and tough, and they work their asses off. I mean, they're just so fun to be around, and I'm really thankful to have those opportunities. And then you asked me something else too. I went on a rant there, but you said professionally and then something else.
Well, we already talked about recruiting, so.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just overall a really good experience, and every year I learn something new. And I think that's one of the things that keeps me going back too, is every year is a new challenge and an opportunity, not just for the athletes to grow, but for me as well.
Yeah, and then you talked about this a little bit earlier, but could you just talk about the growth of the women's competition since you were an athlete to what it looks like now?
Yeah. So my freshman year was 2008. I think there were like 189 girls in the tournament. We ran it in one afternoon. I think it was like the morning session was 9 a.m. to noon, and then there was like a 2-hour break for lunch, and then finals were at 3. And that was the extent of the tournament. I know my sophomore year, the first year I won, I think I had like 8 girls in my bracket, something like that. And it grew every year from that point on. But you look at where we're at now. When I was in high school, we only had a junior division. We weren't split into cadets and juniors yet. Everyone just wrestled juniors. And my senior year, we had that split of cadets and juniors. And now we're to the point where we have 2 separate divisions that both have full, 32 at minimum brackets. Some of the weights, like the 120, 130s, have like 60, 70, 80 girls in them. To the point where there are now discussions about us moving to a different weekend or doing something else because we're starting to outgrow the Fargo Dome, being alongside the men. So just from a number standpoint, we've exploded. I mean, we're now a full 2-day tournament. It's a full 2 days of wrestling, not just like spread out, spread super thin. And the talent has also improved so much as well, especially in the cadet division. I know there's always conversations like at B-dubs and stuff with the coaches every night. And over the past couple of years, a lot of the topic of conversation has been the fact that the cadet division is almost more competitive than the juniors in terms of there being parity and, just like a wide range of athletes. Like sometimes in the juniors, like obviously they're older still, but better, but like the top 8 are the top 8. Whereas in the cadet division, there are like 20 different girls who could be All-Americans and like 5 or 6 different girls who could win. I mean, you could re-wrestle those brackets 5 different times and have 5 different outcomes. And that division is just getting so competitive. And it's just really awesome to see that we are getting that parity, and that these girls are being exposed to top-level competition right from the first round of the tournament. So that's been a really cool progression to watch and to be a part of, as a coach and as an athlete.
Yeah, so clearly Fargo means quite a bit to you. Like you said, you keep going back, and there's just so much growth there, especially in women's wrestling, which is you're a huge advocate for. So what were your thoughts when you found out this year we're not having it?
It was definitely bittersweet. On one hand, I've had a really, really busy summer. In spite of the fact that there's a global pandemic, I think this is the busiest summer I've ever had in terms of workload, between continuing to recruit for King and then with the projects I've been taking on for Wrestling a Girl. I am their collegiate initiatives program manager and recently took on all of the state sanctioning efforts. So I've been extremely busy. So on one hand, I was kind of relieved that like I wasn't going to be tied up for 10 days. But the other hand, I was like, well, now what am I going to do for these 10 days? I've had these blocked off since, August of last year. Like, what do I do here? And it was an odd thing, and part of it wasn't even about me. It was the fact that I felt bad for these kids. You have kids that, look forward to this all year long and then now have it taken away from them. You have kids that have been fundraising for the last year to go to Fargo for the first time. You have kids that were counting on this tournament to get some college exposure. They're going into their senior year and they were, dependent upon this to start getting some looks from college coaches and start getting recruited. And now those opportunities have been pulled away from these kids and it's unfair. I mean, it is what it is and it's for the best, but, that was kind of my first biggest concern is like, what are these kids going to do? I was sad for myself because I was looking forward to it in spite of everything, but, I was heartbroken for a lot of them. A lot of my New York girls were texting me about how upset they were and like what they should be doing to, start getting exposure, like what are the tournaments they could attend and all this. But, I think for me, like it almost felt like a streak was broken too. Like I said, I've been 11 out of the last 12 years. This would have been year 13 for me. And and it's just a weird thing, I have so many great memories there and, I'm sure I'll be back next year unless something happens crazy again. But, this is always going to be the year that Fargo wasn't. And that's going to kind of be an odd thing forever.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. I didn't go last year, so now I'm like missing 2 years in a row. And like you said, it's like a huge wrestling reunion. You see coaches, you see just other coaches.
I mean, like last year, I remember Ben Askren had just fought Jorge Masvidal like 6 days prior. And then the tournament starts, and then there's Ben Askren walking around. Like, he literally bumped into one of my girls. Like, oh, sorry. And, like, we turned around. Like, then there's Ben Askren. We're like, dude, you just got knocked out 6 days ago. Like, what are you doing here? But also at the same time, like, that just goes to show you how attached people get to Fargo. Like, this dude was just knocked out in front of how many people, was, like, concussed on the ground. He's like, yeah, screw it, I'm going to Fargo. Like, I think that's a testament to how much this place sucks you in, that people want to be there that badly. And that's what it is. He said it's like a who's who. The amount of people you see there, the former athletes, the current college coaches. When you go out at night, you go to the Herd and Horns, you go to Bucks, you go to the Turf, B-Dubs, wherever it may be. You can walk into any restaurant or bar within a 1 mile radius of Fargo and pick up a conversation about wrestling with someone like that. And I just think that's so cool. I mean, there's nowhere else and no other tournament of the year where maybe NCAAs, but I mean, other than that, I mean, there's no other tournament in the world where you have that kind of connection with everyone in the area. And it's such a cool environment to be in. And it's, again, I'm talking about it, I'm like, man, there's really no Fargo right now. Like, all my memories keep popping up my social media right now. Actually, the one that came up today was of me and you when I was in the fur vest that one day. I had my sunglasses on. We took that picture up at the media table. That was my Facebook memory today. So it's been a weird week of these memories popping up. Usually that happens and I'm in Fargo and I can repost them. And this year I'm just sitting in my 500 square foot apartment. Like, well, like, it's odd.
Yeah, Sam Herring posted a video the other day on Twitter of my Wayne Fish interview. And I was like, yeah, no Wayne Fish.
What are we going to do without Wayne Fish this year? Like,
I know. Crazy. So you kind of mentioned a few things already, but how would you describe Fargo as an experience for someone who's never been there before? Because I know I had never seen the tournament when I walked in on my very first day of the job USA Wrestling, and I was like, whoa. So how would you describe it to anyone?
I think being there as an athlete and a coach are similar in some capacities and also very different. Like you said, the first time I was an athlete my freshman year, I made the mistake of not going into the Fargo Dome until the day of the tournament. And everyone told me, like, dude, make sure you get in that venue beforehand. Make sure you get the lay of the land. I'm like, dude, I've wrestled in a million tournaments. Like, it's fine. Like, it's wrestling. And I remember walking in that morning for weigh-ins and, like you said, just being like, oh, whoa, this is something else. And I choked and I did horribly. So that was that. And as you know, as you go there back year after year, I mean, you get more acclimated to it, but I still think even now, the first day you go in there, you know, again, I've been going there for over 10 years now. And that first time I walk in the Fargo Dome, I still get that same feeling where like my chest kind of like, it doesn't like, not that it doesn't get tight, but I just kind of have to like take a deep breath and be like, here we go. Like, you know what I mean? And part of that is me knowing what the next 10 days are going to entail. And part of that is just like, I love wrestling so much. And like, this is like the mecca of wrestling in some capacities in our country. I mean, it's the biggest tournament in the country from a numbers standpoint. And I think just the experience, I mean, there's so many things about it, from like the kids selling their gear outside and trading stuff to, you know, everyone's affinity for Maui Wowie smoothies and Cold Stone, and like, you know, everyone's affinity for B-dubs and the slowly creeping up trend of cheese curds and caramel sauce. I mean, like, there's so many things. And last year just happened to be me and Teddy Cook finishing every night with an Irish car bomb, but it is what it is. But there are just things to me that scream Fargo. And as you go to that tournament year after year, that there are things that you just look forward to and things that just define that week. It's such a unique experience that every wrestling fan should see, if not partaking in some capacity, whether you're volunteering, officiating, coaching, whatever. But you can't really describe it to someone and do it justice without being there, because there is just kind of like a visceral reaction that you have to being in that dome and watching these big matches and, you know, seeing everyone go crazy and the support kids have for their teams when their kid from their state is in the finals and people cheering. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it really is, both as an athlete and a coach. And I think once you kind of understand where that affinity comes from.
Yeah, totally. So I want to go back like to just more of your personal experience as well. What was maybe your most memorable Fargo moment as an athlete?
As an athlete, I think it was probably my senior year. I was a 3-time junior Fargo champ. Like I mentioned, I went 1-2 my freshman year. And I remember sitting in the stands that year watching the finals. One of my Michigan teammates, CC Weber, was in the finals, ended up winning, beat Joey Miller in the finals. And I was watching that finals match with my dad, watching her under the spotlight. And I was like, dude, Dad, like, I'm going to be in the finals next year. He's like, oh, yeah? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, if I win Fargo next year, will you get me a tattoo? Like, you have to pay for me to get a tattoo. He's like, okay, sure. Like, you just went 1-2 in this tournament. Like, I don't know why you think you're going to win next year or whatever. I'm still kind of bitter about that. But sure enough, I went back my sophomore year and I won. I went up like 3 weight classes from where I'd been the previous year, won a junior national title. And as pumped as I was in that moment, like, you know, getting my hand raised, going out there, you know, when they do the little parade of champions, getting to hold up my stop sign, like, there was like one day of being really, really stoked about it. And then like my heart sank. I was like, talking mushrooms. I have to do this 2 more times. Because at that point, like, you just have a massive target on your back. Like, you can't really improve from there. All you can do is defend your title. And for a 16-year-old kid, that's a lot of pressure, you know? And, you know, like 6 months out from Fargo, I'd start thinking about it. Like, I was still in my high school boys season. I'd be like, shoot, I got to win Fargo again. Like, that's not an easy task to do once, much less 3 times. So I ended up winning my junior year in a really tight match, actually. This back when we had the best 2 out of 3 period format, won all 3 periods, almost got taken out at the last second, kind of hung on a crotch though. So I was like, all right, 2 down, 1 more. So, you know, again, after I won that second one, I was happy for like a week this time instead of a day. And then it was like, shoot, still got to do this 1 more time. So I think that was always in the back of my mind, like all through like even high school boys folk style season. Like, you know, I won folk style nationals. I won, you know, all these tournaments in between, made a junior world team, cadet world team. And I was still like, still got to win Fargo again. And at this point, you know, even though I had a target on my back, I was the favorite. I was a 2-time national champ, but still going in that tournament, I was like, there was just a ton of pressure. I ended up winning again, obviously, for the 3rd time. And when I got my hand raised in the finals the 3rd time, it was just like this instant relief. Like, all this stuff I had been like bottling up and like being stressed about for literally 3 years, I could finally let go of. And it was just such an awesome moment. Like, I was done with Fargo as an athlete. I never had to go back. At the time, I was only, I think, the 4th person to win at least 3 titles. At the time, it was Tatiana Padilla, Adeline Gray, and then that day, both me and Emily Webster won our 3rd title. So, oh, and I think not Joey Miller. Oh, Nicole Woody won 4. So I was the fourth and fifth person. Were me and Emily Webster. So that was a big deal at the time. I mean, like, especially because we only had a junior division then. So I think that third title was definitely my proudest moment as an athlete. Because it was finally like, man, I did that. Like, that's pretty freaking cool, As a coach, it was actually my first year coaching Team New York. Back then we had the national dual tournament for women. The junior duel is held alongside FARGO. We've now broken up into 2 separate tournaments, but it used to be we'd wrestle the individual tournament and then have our national duels. And obviously for years and years, California were like queens of FARGO. I mean, they had a huge team. They beat everyone. Every once in a while, Texas would beat them. But I think of, the 15 years they had duels, it had been like 10 California titles, 5 Texas titles. Nobody else had ever won. And we roll up with our group of like ragtag 17 Team New York girls. We were like half beat the streets, half upstate girls. And like, I remember having conversations with Coach Hirsch, who was our state director at the time. And he was like, dude, we can win this. I'm like, Hirsch, come on, buddy. Like, I know we have some good girls this year, but like, it's California. Like, everybody knows. He's like, dude, we can do this. I'm like, all right, bud. So individual tournament happens. California won the team title from the individual tournament. And we get the brackets for the duels, and we see that we have California. So they would do like a pool and then a bracket from that pool. And California was in our pool. And he's like, dude, we're going to throw this duel. I'm like, Hirsch. He's like, no, like we'll see him in the pool. They build the brackets in the pool. We'll see him again in the finals. So we're going to throw it. I'm like, Hirsch, we're not throwing a duel. He's like, no, we're doing it. Dude, you're done. I'm like, all right, bud. So for the matches where we had two girls at a weight, we threw out our second string girls. And the weights where we only had one, we forfeited. They beat us like 50-7 or something like that. So they're thinking like, oh, they suck, whatever. We'll see Texas in the finals. So we win the rest of the matches of our pool. We break out into this bracket and we start wrestling. We win our first one, our second one. In the third round, we have Texas. Texas was good, but we knew we had a shot in that duel. I was like, okay, we can win this. We have the right matchups. It was good. Ended up edging out Texas, which set up this rematch with California in the finals. And right away, like, California walks in, like, they're like, oh, we already crushed them 50-7 earlier today. Like, this is going to be a cakewalk. We're going to win that national title number 77. I don't even know. Not that many. And they won the first 2 matches. And then we won a third. And then we won the fourth. And then we won the fifth. And they won one in between. And then we get to Rachel Hale's match. Rachel Hale had won a national title for us the day before. I was at 121. And I'm like looking at the score sheet. I'm like, if Rachel pins or Tex, we win. We still had 2 weights to go at that point, but if Rachel Hale pins or Tex, we win this dual meet. And this is our national champion going out there. We're like, holy shit, we're going to win this. Sure enough, Rachel Hale goes out there, pins this girl in an armbar, I'm pretty sure, and we win a national title with still 2 matches to go. And these girls lost it. I mean, like, our girls in California were just shocked. Like, they had no idea what had just happened. I mean, their coaches were freaking out. They were like, and we wrestled these next 2 matches, and as soon as that last one was done, our entire team storms the stage and literally breaks the stage. They were jumping so much that they crashed the stage, like, through the mats, and the whole stage caved in. And FARGO had to shut down for like 30 minutes while they went and repaired it. And to this day, like, I don't think anyone's ever seen anything like that. I mean, other teams have won besides California since then, but this was a team that, like, wasn't supposed to win a national title. But they bought into this crazy, we're going to throw a dual meet scheme. They believed that we could beat them in the finals, and I think we just kind of shocked the world in that moment. When we were getting our awards, they were playing Empire State of Mind in the arena and stuff. It was such a cool moment for these girls to have accomplished that and being kind of the little giant that could. And they slayed Goliath. So that's a memory that definitely still sticks with me. And that was 7 years ago at this point. So that was pretty awesome.
Cool. As far as FARGO goes, I think we're all good here. I'm all set. But I will ask you just one more question. Just kind of mention them throughout this interview, but just give us some FARGO tournament staples. Like, if you go to FARGO, these are things that you have to check off your, like, a bingo card or something.
I think in terms of in the dome, you have to get a Maui Wowie smoothie for sure. I think you have to at least go take a look down, like, the little gear row of all the kids trading and selling stuff. I'm a shoe nerd myself, so I usually end up spending too much money out there than I should. But at least have to go look. It's just really cool. you have to go to B-Dubs and just sit down at the bar and have a conversation and dip your cheese curds in caramel sauce. Absolute must. And you have to go to the turf at least once, because that's where all good or bad days in Fargo end. You're either celebrating or you're there to forget in one way or another, but it's always a good time. That's kind of where everybody always ends up at the end of the night. So I think that's outside of like the wrestling itself, those would be my 4 must-dos.
Very cool. Well, I just want to thank you for coming on as we remember the year that Fargo wasn't, like you said.
What year shirt do I have on? I have one on. 2016 is the shirt I'm repping today.
Nice.
So I have one for a year. Eventually it's going to turn into a t-shirt quilt. So that's a project in progress.
That's really something Jason Bryant's already been working on, right?
Probably. He has a collection of every turf mug from the past 35 years. So
yeah, and he gets I sit next to him on press row, and he probably gets, I don't know, 50 shirts every time.
Oh, tons. He has so many.
So many t-shirts.
Yeah, so many. It's nuts. And he doesn't even ask. People just walk by and dump a shirt and walk away. I'm like, all right, that's cool. Whatever.
Exactly. I remember the year that the turf burned down while we were watching the final. And Jason was right next to me
my entire life.
Oh my gosh, he was right next to me and he had his mug. When I could not count the amount of people that came over during that time. I was like, hey bud, are you doing all right? Legit concerned about Jason in that moment.
I might have a turf mug. Now I gotta check. Here we go. We'll pour one out. Pour one out for the turf in Fargo.
There it is. All right, Julia, thanks so much for coming on, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.